I like being introduced as having had several decades of experience doing anything but the gray hair sort of gives it away. So, good morning. Um, Scott and I will not be doing a presentation for you. We're going to be engaging you in conversations. So, we will be flexible. You will have input on what we're going to do next sometimes, evidenced by the fact that we're starting a little late, so we already have to make adjustments. And we're also up against a break. So, in the spirit of the World Cafe, the first thing we want to do is practice what it is that we're going to be doing the whole time that we're here. You've heard at least 3 speakers giving you input. So the first thing we want you to do before we even get started is reflect on what you've heard. So if you don't have papers, right now, if you just write on the back of your program, we will give you papers after the break. So the very first thing I want you to do is stop and think. What is the most compelling thing that you have heard this morning so far? What is it that you've heard that's compelling? And what about that is compelling for you, and where does it energize you? And if you're authentic, I've been sitting in the back of the room watching body language, so you do have an answer to this question. Just take a minute to write that down, and you're not going to use it now, but you'll use it later. And compelling could be anything. You could have had a knee-jerk reaction, you could have had a very positive reaction, curiosity, whatever that is. Okay, just take a couple of seconds. What's most compelling? Energized you. And we'll move on. Okay. And this will be another thing that you'll experience all day. Either my voice or Scott's voice will be interrupting you just as you get started. So get used to that. I'm interrupting you now to say, you got your notes, let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about the World Cafe. So the way we're going to work is I'm going to now introduce you to World Cafe and what's going to be happening. And after your break that you're getting ready for already, Scott is going to come back and we're going to start walking you through the World Cafe. So another thing about me, just in terms of introduction, I love the work that I do, and I've been doing it for about 40 years. I love seeing people learn and grow and change, especially people who we thought wouldn't change. So that is why I do the work that I do. And so I'm very enthusiastic about the World Cafe because after a couple of those decades that Bob talked about, I was introduced to the World Cafe and learned that we can do our work in much more meaningful ways. So in a nutshell, if I talked about what's the World Cafe about, if I could tap into the wisdom that everybody brought into this room in relationship, just in relationship to Madeline's slide that talked about the problems, if I could harness what you've learned from all of your experience, the ideas that you've sat on, and apply them just to that one problem, that would be powerful and would be brilliant. And as we go through, I'm going to talk about all the reasons that doesn't happen. And I don't have to tell you because you're out in the field and you know some of the answers to that questions. So what the World Cafe brings, as a matter of fact, and what it is, essentially, is it's just a very simple way of fostering collaboration between people. So when I learned at World Cafe, 2 things I recognized. is that I had spent years working, and actually in corporate America. At some point, I realized I was working in corporate America, helping people, I want to say helping men, because I worked primarily with men, make more money. And even though that was great and enjoyable, at some point I decided I probably need to step back and see, can I do some work that's going to make a difference? And the World Cafe has helped me to do that. But the thing I realized is that people had been paying me for years to get them to sit down and talk to each other. Just stop and sit down and talk to each other and document millions of dollars that they saved because of the errors they didn't make, because they sat down and talked to the people who do the work and know the work before they made decisions. So that's the way of introducing the World Cafe. So a couple of things that, and the other thing I need to tell you, this is a simple process that wasn't created. It was discovered by that same process. And I'm not going to give you as much of the history as I'd like for you to have of the World Cafe because we don't have time. But I want to give you the deep experience of the World Cafe. Now, there are people in this room, as a matter of fact, who are experts, practice at doing World Cafe. In the spirit of everyone here being valuable and that you're all experts, I want you to find out who those people are at the end of our work tomorrow. And the reason why, I don't want you to look to them for how you should do this. And I don't want them to offer their expertise. They're smiling. I don't want them to offer their expertise on here's how you have to do that, because one of the concepts of the World Cafe is everyone has something important to bring, and we need to hear from everyone. So we try to use very strategic questions, and it's all in the questions. I'll talk a little bit more about that, to say we need to think deeper. When I hear Madeline talking about not only the problems they face, but the energy and the creativity that young people are using, there are two things we have to get ready for. We need to be thinking now of how to bring that future that they need into the present. That's the only way we're going to be ready for them. We have to start working now to bring the future they need into the present if we're going to prepare for it. The other thing is the type of thing we want to do in World Cafe. Artificial intelligence is never going to replace that. And so I read these articles about, oh, artificial intelligence is going to take over these jobs, and then I read the ones about artificial intelligence will never be able to look into the soul of a human being and say, this is what's important, this is what it means, and this is what we need to do. And that's the type of thing we're going to be doing. So I want to throw out several things. One is, we all know that we use only a small portion of our brain throughout our whole lives. There's a reason for that. The big reason for that is we don't have time to be creative. There's always so many demands on us. And the other thing is, if you've been in this kind of situations I've been in where a manager will tell me, you can go into my section, but don't talk about the schedule. And I go on the midnight shift with the plant union guys, and what do you think they want to talk about? Nothing but the schedule. And because we did that, some operator of a machine at midnight said to me, if they really wanted to solve this problem, they would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have to go back to the manager who told me not to talk about the schedule to say, I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm just going to bring you the answer. And I want you to know where it came from. That speaks volumes to the type of thing that we're trying to do here. Okay. So let me emphasize a few things about World Cafe that are going to be important to us. I want you, people who have been rewarded all of your life for not knowing, for having the answer, the quick answer, I want you to try to step into a place of not knowing today. I want you to be an inquiry. Be curious and inquire with other people. The other thing I want you to do is we are not going to facilitate you. So we're going to give you principles to operate on. We're going to have those right on your table. I want you to take responsibility for making the World Cafe work because you are helping your table to do what it is you want to do. I want you to have a little fun because I think you can be more creative when you're having fun. And forget this can't be done here, it's never been done before. And the other thing I think may be very important, if you could be in this room today, not back in your work situation, thinking about all the reasons why this can't be done, just be here and be creative and off of your own ideas. Okay, what else do I need to emphasize? Okay, so I'm doing for you in less than 15 minutes what we would normally do in about 45 minutes to an hour because you're so smart and we don't have much time. So this is a fabulous concept that I think if you understand what we're doing, not just in World Cafe, but throughout this day and a half. So there's a concept that says, we get a stimulus. Cecile talked to you, and that was a stimulus. She stimulated some ideas for you. What we usually do when we get a stimulus is we respond. And we respond with what we think about it, or someone asking you a question. And I've been in several conversations since I've been here, and I just noticed someone asks a question and someone answers. What about that moment to think about what is the answer I want to have to this question? So the concept of stimulus response is there needs to be a space between the stimulus and the response because that's where we decide who we're going to be, how we want to answer, and the kinds of responses represents who we are and the future we're trying to create. So it's a pause. So I'm giving you permission today to really pause and think and explore. Ask deeper questions. Try to think together. So a couple of things about the way we're going to be working together is that the World Cafe works on several very simple principles. Every one of them, I guarantee you, you've heard before. So when you get to your tables, there's going to be, at the break, that there will be these guidelines. These guidelines are there for a reason, and we'll talk about them as we go along. But you want to listen together. Listening together and thinking together is different from thinking by yourself. It's that I want you to think that, I want you to imagine, when you're having a conversation, you're all talking and you're speaking to some kind of wisdom in the middle of the table. You're trying to pour it in. At the end of that conversation, we want you to think about what's the essence of what we just said. Normally, we work on problems and we look for answers. Here, we know our problems and we're asking you to use those to explore possibilities. What is possible? Because you know what we do. We work on a problem, we get deeper and deeper into it. What we want to do here is, given that we have problems, what are the possibilities? And to do that, you need to listen together. And I want you to listen as if your life depended on what the person was saying. Not listen in terms of whether I like this, whether I agree with it, but listen as if your life depended on it, and then give your input. I'm going to jump around on this chart because we don't have time to talk about all of them, but there's some that are very, very important to the way we are going to work today that I want to emphasize. Another is linking ideas. When someone speaks, how does that link not only with what I just said, but what someone else just said? That's how we get our collective wisdom, is we are linking ideas, because we're not trying to get the best idea from every person. We're trying to get the collective ideas from the tables where you're going to sit. The other thing is about questions. If I tell you how much time Scott and I spent coming up with what's the right question, and I think we have my very favorite quote here. Einstein, who we all assume as being brilliant, said, if I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, and my life depended on it, I'd spend 55 minutes determining what's the question to ask. Because once I got the right question, I could easily answer it in 5 minutes. Most of us are not Einsteins, but the World Cafe, the centerpiece of the World Cafe, is having the right question that provokes you to think. So if I ask you a question that, of course, you don't know the answer, that you can inquire and explore together. That's going to be the important thing. Try to deal with that question. And something else I want you to do for us. If you think of a deeper, bigger question that question provokes, that you think we need to talk about, you need to let us know. Scott is willing to change the next question because someone at table over there said, you know what the real question for Florida is? The real question for Florida right now on this topic is this. That's the question we should be exploring. So we will have that possibility. I don't want all of you to change the questions, but I invite you.
We do have to settle on a question.
We do have to settle on a question. And we're going to be in control, but we are very easy to influence. But the other thing is, let me tell you what else is important about that. If you come up with that question, it's not that we have to talk about it. You may have to live with that question. Take that question for a walk. Take that question back home. Because the best place to answer that question may be back in the context of where you work, with the people with whom you work. So questions are also things that provoke us and make us think. If you're like me, you wake up at 4 o'clock and you say, oh, it just came to me. A very good idea. So sometimes questions are to walk with. How are we doing on time? Pardon me? Okay, I should be wrapping up. So, of all the principles, and I have to say that the principles that you would have on your table work together. So if you took those principles as a system of communication and understanding, you need to be doing a number of things at one time. You need to be thinking together. You need to be linking ideas. You need to be discovering what's going on. All of that works together. So I'm asking you to step into a very creative place today. So let me make a couple of comments about the principles and qualities that will be most important to us today. One will be the questioning, and I've told you why that's important. You're listening together, but you're also listening for insights. If a kernel of an idea comes up, I want you to say, what if? What about this? So you're listening deeply. Our friend Peavy, one of our teachers, said, listen as if your life depended on it. Connecting diverse perspectives. I can assure you that when Cecile was up talking, in people's minds and hearts, they were reacting differently to the content of what she was talking about. No matter what that was, it's valuable in terms of reality, because whatever you were thinking is what you're working off every day back at home. So it's important that you bring that in the room. That's why we ask you to take that time to reflect on it, because now we want you to get deeper into it. We will visit that question again. But connect those perspectives. I have a friend who said, when people are in conflicting situations, the only thing that's going to move you forward is that I can stop, hear your side of the issue, your perspective, and I got to find something useful in what you're saying. I got to be empathetic enough to know that there is something that's making this human being that's the same kind of human being I am think like that. So I need to find some wisdom in what the other person is saying. So we're having to connect these diverse perspectives to come up with that collective intelligence that's probably an even better perspective. That's what you're going to be doing today. Now, discovery sounds like a big word, but you'll be surprised at the little things you're discovering. You're discovering that what we had thought, and one of the ways you discover that I really want to emphasize is we hold our assumptions lightly. So if you hold your assumptions lightly, then you're able to work with this process of sharing your discoveries and linking ideas, because you'd be amazed. I am amazed at how often my assumptions are proven to be at least distorted, or they're dated. And if we can hold test your own assumptions, especially the assumptions you have about what's motivating people in your community to be involved, to vote, to not vote. Don't assume you know why people don't go to the polls. I was thinking today, if they gave people $50 to register and a $70 Walmart card to vote, we'd probably have more people out to vote, but we just wouldn't like that motivation. But don't assume that you know the answers, and I think Cecile talked about that, and find out what's working and important to people before you start suggesting what they might do. So, with that as an introduction, see how he works? He's already standing up.
I'm a jack in the box.
Huh?
I'm a jack in the box.
He's a jack in the box. So Scott's going to tell you specifically about World Cafe and how we're going to work before the break.
Yeah, so we're going to send you on a break in just a moment. Listen very closely to these couple of important logistic points. Number one, to my right and to my left, which is to your left and your right, you will see a table on each side with gold cloth. This is your treasure table. This is where you should put things that you don't want to be carrying around with you for the next hour, because you're going to be moving around this new room, not camping at one table. So things you want to carry with you, keep with you. But things that you don't, we have 2 nice tables for you. We have armed security guards outside. No, not really. But they will be fine. They will be safe. So don't carry things you don't need to carry with you that will just encumber you as you move through the cafe. When you go to break, take your treasures to the treasure table. Number 2, what's going to happen, we're going to give you 10 minutes for your break. When you come back to a different table than the one you're at now, and come back to different people than you are sitting with right now. Do not travel together through the cafe. When you arrive in the cafe, coming back from break, you will find some materials on the paper and then on the table, and we'll explain exactly how to use those. So 10-minute break, which probably means at 8 minutes I'll be starting to explain. Take your treasures to the treasure table, go do what you need to do, come back to a new table with new people.